Hi, my name is Heather Gordon. Today is the 17th of April, 2026. I'm a mixed media artist originally from County Down in Northern Ireland, and now I'm currently living in East London. I feel like growing up in a small town in Northern Ireland definitely shaped how I see the world and how I create. Some of my earliest memories are drawing, painting, and escaping into imaginary worlds. Art became a kind of safe space for me, especially because I found school quite challenging. I'm neurodivergent and struggled a lot socially and emotionally, including being bullied. Art was the one thing that gave me confidence. It was the one time people would have came to me, asked for help, and value what I could do from a very young age. It became both an escape and a way to build my self-esteem. I feel like it was a way for me to explore the things that I find inspiring and things that I've never really been able to experience as someone from a small rural community. I had never really traveled. I had never really been to an art gallery or a museum at this point. So it was kind of my way to explore the world and explore myself as a person, my interests, where I want to travel, and what I find beautiful in the world. For my art projects in high school, for example, I was doing a lot of interdisciplinary, varied work based on different cultures, such as looking at African traditional textiles, American 60s psychedelic art, and digital illustration featuring memento mori symbolism. I also made a bust sculpture out of discarded technology as a commentary on how the internet has taken over our minds and society. After that, it all kind of snowballed from there. I chose to do my foundation art degree in Belfast Metropolitan College. And then after that, I went on to study a bachelor's in textile art, design, and fashion design in the University of Ulster in Belfast. I feel like at this time, I didn't really consider myself an artist. I chose to go down the design route as I had always been inspired by architecture and inspired by 3D forms and silhouettes. And fashion was something that I was always drawn to in my own self expression. So it felt natural to pursue this in my studies. So even while I was kind of doing the fashion design, my work and my process was always very messy and abstract. I did a lot of experimenting with destroying photographs and mark making with unusual objects. And my inspiration for my final collection was about pollution and a dystopian view on society with the messiness and degradation and nature taking over urban environments. So at this time, I used a lot of ripped up, reclaimed fabric and painterly print techniques to convey the subject matter. I love the creative process and conceptualization of ideas during this time, but I struggled with having to be perfectionistic and tidy in the technical sense, such as even hemlines and sewing techniques. So I find that aspect very stressful. So I feel like when I graduated back in 2019, I was actually very burnt out with my work at that time. So I felt like I just kind of needed to take a break from fashion during lockdown. And whenever I was looking after my granny, I kind of went back to my roots and purchased some air dry clay, some canvases, spray paint, a screen printing set. And I kind of just played around with my art again. And I feel like I needed that time to focus on my health. So both my physical health and my mental health have informed a lot of my creative processes and who I am today. As I mentioned before, I'm neurodivergent and I also have fibromyalgia, which can impact how often I can make work and obstruct my art practice. For me, I find it very therapeutic to be able to touch my work and the tactile aspect of my creative process, the motion of paint, kneading of clay, and threading yarn through material. I feel like it's all a very cathartic and a meditative process for me. And I feel like this is why I always go back to clay and to textiles because of what they bring to my process and also what they represent to me. The slowness of these processes helped me to slow my busy brain down and escape reality for a while. And I feel like, especially in this day and age, with a lot of quick things and AI art and people kind of skipping a lot of these creative processes and taking shortcuts, I find it very human and just very real to sit down with clay and sit down with paint and a brush and not really know what's going to happen, but kind of going with my intuition and just feeling the materials, being in the moment and enjoying the process. So themes like life cycles, memory, grief, and transformation show up a lot in my work. Right now, I'm focusing on a body of work based on the moon and its cycles. This connects a lot to my own experience with bipolar disorder, which I was diagnosed with in 2017. I've often felt drawn to the moon, especially as someone who struggles with sleep and often finds myself awake at night. So I'm exploring the ideas of cycles and emotional journeys, energy levels, and the phases of life and how they mirror the phases of the moon. There have actually been studies done that show that bipolar people can actually be affected more by the moon cycles, which kind of inspired this whole project. Some days feel full and energized, and others feel like a time for rest or withdrawal. So, this work is reflecting the ebb and flow of life and finding meaning in those changes rather than resisting them. These are globally recognized motifs as the sun and moon are constants within our lives. And I find a lot of my inspiration come from these late nights and early mornings, looking at the moon and kind of contemplating my life, things that have passed, and also things that I hope to achieve. And I feel like we all go through similar cycles, specifically women, even with our menstrual cycles. And to me, the moon is a symbol of creativity and intuition, of depth and introspection. And I find it quite refreshing, the idea of rebirth and regeneration and starting new things and going through the creative process and knowing when to stop and knowing when to begin again. So I think one of the biggest challenges of being an artist is dealing with creative blocks and imposter syndrome. In today's world, especially with social media, it's very easy to compare yourself to others and feel like you're falling behind. There's this pressure to constantly create, to be visible, to market yourself, and that can be really overwhelming. And for me personally, I also struggle with the balance between creating and documenting my work. Sometimes I feel like I can't just create naturally without thinking about capturing a video and how it will be perceived when I'm posting it online. There's also the financial side, pricing your work, finding your audience, and all of that is quite overwhelming when you're still establishing yourself and you don't really have a basis to go off of. Some advice I would tell my younger self is to be kinder to myself, to not take everything so seriously, and to allow myself to play and experiment without worrying about the final outcome. I'd also say that it's okay to rest. Productivity isn't everything, and your worth isn't defined by how much you create. And probably most importantly, to trust your instincts and not feel like you fit into a box and being authentic to yourself. As someone who is inspired by nature, which is something I would say is due to my granny's influence on my life and spending quiet moments with her in her garden and watching the birds. I'm also really inspired by the philosophy and aesthetics of wabi sabi. So, this is the idea of finding beauty in imperfection, in decay, and in the passage of time. That concept really resonates with both my life and my work. To be able to appreciate our good days and our bad days and appreciate the journeys we've been on and things that we consider imperfections, to find the beauty in them. Whether it's a weed growing in a pavement or a rusty nail in an old piece of wood, these things tell a story. And similar with our bodies and our lives and our artwork, these are all parts of us and signs of life and signs that we have lived and we have learned and that we're still here. I feel like a lot of my work comes from difficult experience, but I try and present it in a way that still reflects beauty, especially through nature. So, for example, I did a series called Undulation, which was inspired by curves and the movement of nature, such as formations of sedimentary rock and things like that. So, these things form under pressure over years, and it's a very slow process, which no one really notices until they see the final result. And I feel like our lives are like that in a lot of ways as well. People don't really see things beneath the surface and they don't really see the journeys that people have been on. They just kind of see who they are on that day. So these are the kind of themes that I explore within my work. And I use the representation of space in the sky to represent the inner space within my mind and the things that are beneath the surface that people can't really see. So I hope when people see my work that they can see themselves in my work and they can see the experience that they've went through themselves and their own resilience and stories that they've went through, such as love and loss. I want to encourage an understanding and awareness of disability and that often people are struggling and they don't know how to process things and they might not know how to ask for help. And I feel like that's something I want to show through my work, that it's okay to ask for help and that we can all kind of uplift and support each other. And another thing is I would love if my work inspires someone else to reconnect with their own creativity or to try something new and something that just kind of lights them up and makes life worth living. And I feel like that's really special to me. And I feel like if everyone did that, the world would be a much better place. So I thank you all so much for your time and allowing me to share a bit of my work. You can follow me on Instagram. My account is Heather Gordon with 2 underscores. And I'll hopefully have some of my new work and exhibitions to share there soon. So thanks for listening and have a lovely day.